Well, DevCentral community, it is that time again. It's Thursday at 12:30 Pacific, and it's time for us to connect with you here on DevCentral Connects. I'm John. This is Jason. And Jason, how you doing today, my friend?
I am pretty well. Spent the week up in Decatur, Illinois. My son was at a leadership conference, and so yeah, you talk about cornfields and flat. You want to see flat? You come to like central Illinois, and it's like crazy flat.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's
came back today, so I feel refreshed.
Feel refreshed. You've been in the cornfields, and now you're back home and ready to connect with everybody here on DevCentral. That's awesome, man. Hey, we've got a few people that have already chimed in on the chat today, so this is it's good to see everybody. Josh is out there saying hi. There's Dennis Ivy. Dennis Ivy, man, it's good to see you. And Chris Miller, awesome, man. That looks like a Wisconsin Badger on Chris Miller's little logo there. So go Badgers, right? And then man, I think Pasilva's here, Sarah's here. We got lots of great people. It's going to be amazing today. So, well, hey, there's a couple of shows coming up, if I recall, right? Is that right, Jason? We've got right. You Want Answers coming up in a week.
Yeah, on April Fool's Day, no less. Yeah, so we
Jason,
might have to do something. We might have to do something fun on that day.
That's right.
And then, we got live labs on April 6th with Tyler Hatton from WWT. We're going to do modern apps and microservices with Nginx. That'll be fun. And then, right back here 2 weeks from today. And then, of course, also, if you haven't registered for Agility yet, go do that. It's April 20th through the 22nd. We'll have, keynotes and breakout sessions, labs, oh my. So get on it.
It's going to be awesome. So it's all virtual again this year, man. I'm hoping we can get back in person real soon on that.
Yeah.
We were talking to the Agility Planner people. We're like, hey, let's do this thing in person real quick, like real soon, But nonetheless, this year still doing the virtual thing, but it'll still be great content, a lot of great, speakers and people and all that. So good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, and hey, and another quick note about that live lab with Worldwide Technology, that people love those things, and which rightfully so. It's free lab infrastructure. You just log in with an account there at Worldwide Technologies, and then you got access to all the lab stuff. It's already built for you, all the parts and pieces, but then you get to dive into the technology. It's super cool.
Yeah, and we're partial to their F5 labs, but they also have vendor X out there, as well as just the technologies you use across vendors like Ansible and the different HashiCorp tools as well.
Lots of
good environment to go out and learn in.
That's right. You can go blow it up and then just reset it. No problem. That's awesome, man. Hey, so Jason, today we've got zero trust is our topic for the day. It's like, what is this thing? Am I suddenly not supposed to trust anybody? Like, what's going on in my life right now?
Correct.
So
yes, don't trust anybody.
Yes, it's like that. That's precisely what you shouldn't do, is not trust anyone.
I want the X-Files theme. We couldn't, obviously license it, and they probably shut our live stream down by playing it, but it's playing in my head right now.
That's right. That's right.
So Mark Snow wrote that music. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, that's
good. Creepy theme. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful music for that show. Hey, so I did a little bit of Googling. Apparently there's this thing called the Googles out there on the internets. And I looked up this research, or this study that was done back in 2019. Forbes magazine did this, and they were like, hey, what are the most trusted or untrusted professions in the world, kind of a thing, right? And I don't know, this may be specific to the United States, but I'm not quite sure. But let me let you guess, what is the most trusted, and then what is the least trusted profession on that list? What do you think, Jason?
The most trusted, I would say probably number one is weatherman.
The weather. Immediately I thought about Groundhog Day, So, Phil.
The most trusted profession, maybe teacher.
Okay. Teacher's up there. That was like number 4 on the list.
Yeah.
Okay. But, most trusted.
I wouldn't say politician is very high.
Politician was the lowest, the least trusted. It is. That's a whole. We get to have a whole DevCentral Connects on that. Like, why do we keep voting these people in? We don't trust any of them. So anyway, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, the most trusted was like the medical community. In fact, nurses specifically was number one. And then the doctors were the next one, closely behind, but very trusted. And then pharmacists right behind that. So I thought, so way to go, first responder, frontline. Well, it's maybe first responder, but like the frontline medical teams out there, way to be trustworthy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I didn't even think about the nurses and doctors. Yeah, good stuff.
I guess it's true. You go in and whatever it is, the nurse is going to come help you. It's like, I think very rarely do you think, hey, this nurse is about to hurt me right now. You just think, no, they're here to help. And they seem very nice and helpful. So it makes sense. Good to go.
It's neither here nor there, but in primary care, it used to be all MDs, right? But over the years, you start to see physician's assistants, and then recently, the nurse practitioners, and kind of looking at school, because one of my kids was interested in going the medical path, so we're kind of doing some research. Well, what does a nurse practitioner do versus a physician's assistant? Because they both require about the same timing in school. It's like five-year program or whatever for bachelor's, and with that endorsement and certification. And so like kind of what's the difference between the two? Because they both kind of do, at least in my experience as a patient, they kind of do the same things. But I asked the nurse practitioner, my pediatrician, and it's like, basically it's just the approach. The physician's assistant approaches it from a pathology standpoint, nurse practitioner from the patient care perspective. So if you wondered, that's kind of the deal. So
there it is.
It's neither here nor there, but I wondered, and so
you wondered and you asked and you got the answer. It's a beautiful answer. That's awesome.
The schooling is a little bit different, but the cost is about the same. The years in school is about the same. So it's really, do you care about people or do you care about solving the problem? Are you Dr. House, or someone else?
I love it. Well, good to go, man. Well, hey, we've got two people that are extremely trustworthy. Dare I say they would beat out the medical professionals on my list,
Brian's back in the green room, and he's like, why am I even here?
Am I coming on or not? No doubt, man. Well, let's do this thing. We got Brian and Corey, two of the absolute best here at F5, and this is going to be a great talk about zero trust. There they are, two of the most trusted in the world, Corey and Brian. Great to have you guys here today, man.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, excellent to be here. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. I would say that maybe as we think through zero trust today, we think about the politicians, which, by the way, the group that beat out the politicians as more trustworthy are the used car salespeople. If you're getting beat by the used car salesman, there's a problem, right? There's a problem. But anyway, good to go.
For sure.
Well,
what would have been at the top of your list on trusted? Have we already covered it, or would there be something for you?
I don't know. I heard Chris Miller was on, and any kind of Michigan Badger. I think that falls squarely within something you shouldn't trust.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Wow.
The Badgers. Yeah, little shot across the bow there, Mr. Chris. Mr.
Little
Miller.
shade.
Love it. Way to go, Corey.
Chris is a great guy.
No,
absolutely
good
trusted.
Stuff. Good stuff.
So we're here for zero trust, but before we dive into the deep, what is it? Where did it come from?
So it's John Kindervag, formerly of Gartner, way back in the day. It's Corey, what is it? 10 years ago at this point that the concept of zero trust first came out from an analyst report, right? We talk about Gartner and Forrester and all the many analysts, and we have different things to say about them, but what they do is they take what customers are doing, what trends they see, and they try to put them into something that's digestible and easy for the industry to converge on one way of talking about things. And zero trust is a very catchy name, so it means that we're all talking about it. But what I found is it's open to a lot of interpretation, right? Every customer I talk to has a little bit different view what exactly it is and how they apply the concepts or the principles of zero trust. And so maybe that's what we should talk about, really, is the principles of zero trust. And I think the first one is the principle of least privilege, right? And what that means is, whether it's a system, a user account, or whatever it is, that you don't give it any more permission to do things than it absolutely needs, right? So you don't give domain admin to the Joe Blow in sales, right? You don't give him that role. And if he requests something that requires that role, either you deny him outright or you have some sort of step-off authentication that grants that privilege on an as-needed basis. So that's probably the core tenet of zero trust is least privilege.
So one quick thing on that, Brian, I'd love to get your thoughts, maybe Corey as well. It seems to me like sometimes you have this like scope crawl, like this crawl of authentication or permission where, hey, someone starts here and then they move over here, but people just forget to go back and like, take off the permissions of from their account, that kind of thing. So how do you deal with that problem?
Yeah, that is very much a process, type of issue, the accumulation of privileges over time. Mm-hmm. And going back to Brian's point on zero trust, you really, boiling down to least privileged access, being able to never trust, always verify, and continuously monitor, right? So the question of accumulated privileges is part of that always verify. Not only verify does the person have rights, but continuously verify should they have rights to that resource, right? Scoped upon their role within the organization.
Okay, so it's like a constant check,
Continuous, right? We can't rest on our laurels, right? And I think the opportunity now is what can we look at in terms of the technology and metadata that we have access to be able to make more of those decisions intelligently in real time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and that goes to and these things are much more possible now because we have better identity management systems, right? We have proliferation of options for identity as a service, whether it's our good friends at Microsoft and Azure AD, Okta, Ping, ForgeRock, there's vendors galore that can help you get there. The thing that if I'm one of our listeners or viewers today that I walk away from this is if you've had an infrastructure for a long time, go do an account review. Go look at like what privileges were you granting 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, right? I can remember back in the dinosaur times when I ran a network and the systems. If somebody was in your IT infrastructure, if they're on your IT team, you're granting them fairly significant admin privileges, from day one. That shouldn't happen anymore, not even for an IT administrator. What should happen is when they go to request access to something, there should be a check, as Corey said, right? There should be a check every time somebody requests to access something, even if they've previously been authenticated. That's how this can work more effectively. So as people's roles change in your organization, you don't have left. A lot of times we think only about when somebody onboards and when somebody leaves the company. We don't think about when somebody starts in an IT role and has administrative privileges and then goes and works in marketing and still has administrative privileges after they've left that role. And that's very dangerous, not just dangerous from a disgruntled employee perspective, but dangerous from an audit perspective. Somebody comes in and audits your controls and finds somebody that has privileges they shouldn't have. That can be costly in terms of fines and compliance and everything else. So thinking of authentication and authorization as ephemeral things and not one-time provision things is a good way to approach this and be able to implement something that's scales and meets the principles of zero trust.
So how has that been realized in the tools of today? Like, because I think back to running an Active Directory infrastructure, and it was it was complicated enough alone to get it set up, but it's, you're trying to figure how to get permissions for a specific thing to somebody, and from a business standpoint, it's like you can wait the 3 days to figure out how to get them the least privilege or give them admin and move about your day. Fast forward, where we are now, where's the granularity? Like, are those tools in the Active Directories, or are those third-party tools that plug into the Active Directories and the Oktas?
Yeah, so that's a very, very complex and almost a religious conversation, right? But oftentimes there's tools available on the market that can allow you to audit your directories, and but if you haven't gotten a proper inventory of your applications, right? If you don't know what I need to protect, for what do I need to govern identity, it's probably best to get hands around that first. In order to determine the scope of what access controls are necessary to be able to access those resources. The directory is a repository of user data, a repository of the attributes associated with those users, and so we've seen a big movement into federation. And so, that directory infrastructure itself presenting a point of or attack surface, a point of risk within the organization. So, I'd say take advantage of the opportunity to move to more federated forms of authentication and authorization, as well as make sure that you have a concise inventory of not only just the applications within your network, but what are all the control and management plane surfaces that people may have access to on the network as well, that are being accessed from things like APIs, right? I think that is probably the closest thing to the any firewall rule on most people's networks today is all the API interfaces that are available but are probably not governed at all. And probably are using sources of identity, sources of truth that are probably not centralized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I guess one thing that I want to keep in mind that I'd love to kind of address as we go through today is, when do you know you have arrived? Like, when do you know that it's like, all right, the big checkbox has been checked, I am now zero trust? Or do you ever fully arrive? So maybe just kind of keep that in mind for a second if you want to address that. But Brian, you mentioned that the least privilege is kind of that first place to start. That's the big first thing. What would be another one that you might mention?
Well, I think also once we talk about zero trust, another way to think about it is, once I've authenticated someone and authorized them, do I now trust them? No, you still don't trust them, right? And that's
when do you trust them? Like, when do they?
You never do, right? And so one of the things to think about is, what controls do I have in place when an authenticated, authorized user decides to do bad things? Right. So that's the next thing. So now, once I've decided, how to do privilege management, which is non-trivial, right? But things like, F5 offers tools, step authentication, identity aware proxy, and our access policy manager. Nginx gateway, API gateway functionality has, authentication validation capabilities as well. But once you've kind of stepped through that hurdle, think about, now start just think like an attacker. Think like, what would I do, right? I've made it hard for you to authenticate, or not hard for you to authenticate, but I've put authentication challenges in place. I've got effective step-up authentication. Now what? Well, what do I trust? Well, I still don't trust you. I still need checks, right? I still need something in place when one of my incident response team says, hey, something looks hinky over here, I need a way to shut down that connection or inspect that connection. So too often we think of firewalls and IPS as tools for the edge, or the perimeter of the network, or the perimeter of my campus data center. However, really start thinking about next-gen firewall and IPS and things for east-west type traffic, for internal traffic that may itself be dangerous, because there's no telling when a contractor or an employee who knows they're about to be fired, or somebody that's just had enough is going to decide that, hey, I'm gonna steal some intellectual property on my way out the door, or I'm gonna plant some malware. I'm gonna do, you need to be able to have that non-repudiation capability in place, so that even when something happens and things inevitably do, you can trace it back and contain the issue and have effective incident response. So always make sure you have compensating controls in place, even when you do trust the connection to some degree.
And so, basically, the perimeter is there is no perimeter anymore, and everything should be a castle.
Yeah, absolutely. You need something monitoring the flows, right? It's all about compensating controls. You're never going to be 100% secure. You're never going to 100% trust anything, but you do want to have something in place so when something does happen, I have a way to address that thing happening. People often talk to me about WAF, right? And that's like my specialty. I've been on the show before.
That's right.
Talk to me about WAF, and they say, well, WAF's hard to put in blocking mode. Totally agree. Often it's hard to get a WAF in blocking mode, but have one there and passively, scanning traffic, because when a vulnerability pops up that your app team can't patch, even if you put one signature in blocking, you have that compensating control in place where you can go and granularly apply a signature, say, you know what, I can't patch my Apache Struts vulnerability for the 80th time this year. So I want to, do something out here. So that WAF that was sitting in transparent or passive mode for, the last 12 months suddenly becomes super valuable to block just one thing as a compensating control.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned, do you ever arrive, right? It's really a journey, right? It's, can we get off the ground? Can we reach a certain altitude, and can we maintain that altitude, right? And so most organizations are either trying to get off the ground, or they're climbing up to altitude, right? But that's going to be a perpetual flight. You only land when your organization closes its doors, right? When you're out of business, you have no more data to protect. Really, is when you arrive.
So I guess based on that, maybe you don't ever want to fully achieve, zero trust. You don't want to shut your doors, but I think that's important for everyone to understand that, you can't necessarily put a stake in the ground, plant your flag and say, hey, we have arrived. We are now zero trust organization X or whatever. The truth from what I'm gathering then is we've implemented controls and processes and those kinds of things to achieve a zero trust, model, but it's a never ending journey, really. So you should start the journey and you should do these things, but understand you're going to continually move. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is if there, I don't want this to seem like Sisyphus, right? You're just rolling the boulder up the hill for infinity. There is a point where you've arrived when suddenly acquiring a company doesn't seem like a big deal from a trust perspective, right? If think about the complexity of merging two companies. If you get to a point where you're acquiring a company and you're like, I have controls in place that all I have to do is hook them into federation here and there, and I can give them access to everything they need to get up and running very quickly. And I'm drawing on this example because I've been right in the thick of a few acquisitions recently at F5, and I can tell you the IT parts are where things sometimes are very difficult, and sometimes but the faster we get through them, the quicker we get to being productive again. And I think if and as F5 has gone through its third major acquisition, we're actually getting really good at onboarding a whole other entity and getting working with them and collaborating and doing productive things. And we're technologists, and we forget sometimes that implementing cool technology is all about enabling people to be productive. And this is where I feel like you've definitely gotten to some level of zero trust mastery when you can onboard a whole new organization or something as small as a new app or a new SaaS-based service for your employees, and say, you know what, it's not that big a deal because I've got the controls in place, I've got the architecture in place, and I bring this in, and we're pretty good to go without worrying about, have I got principal least privilege in place?
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a certain level of comfort when you get there, but comfort's usually dangerous. And so it's always like, you set your goals and it's like, this is where we want to get to, and you arrive and you feel like, okay, we've arrived. But usually if you're really evaluating in the process of whether you've arrived or not, usually by the time you arrived at the initial goals, new goals have already been set. And so, to your point, Corey and John, it's like, you're never really there. It's a journey. And, it takes that reflecting time along the journey to make sure that you don't hit that complacency, because that's where bad stuff starts to happen. Yeah. And that's true of life. That's not just true of zero trust.
Yeah.
Just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not always watching me.
Exactly. You're just aware that is actually happening now. Yeah. It's kind of interesting in my mind, just, that it's like, hey, if I'm going to onboard a new company or a new app or whatever, in the past, maybe pre-zero trust mindset would be, well, I need to kind of pump the brakes here. I need to go slow because I don't know what I'm getting into. I don't trust these people. I don't know what they're all about, whatever, that kind of an idea. Right. But now if you don't trust anybody, it's like, hey, welcome to the club, man. I don't trust anybody. You're right in the middle of it all. So yeah, it kind of, it puts it all in perspective. I think that's a cool thing.
And really at the base or ground level, it's setting up those frameworks. Yeah. Whether it be the identity framework, your endpoint, management frameworks, your incident response frameworks, and you're looking at, whether it's something that's internal to your organization or foreign to your organization, can we accurately, identify and measure, all of the associated telemetry associated with, a flow to an application. You take a look at something like, SolarWinds, right? And, what, from a system to system perspective and from a supply chain perspective, what frameworks that organizations have to really govern, any of that traffic and be able to measure and look at anomalies, right? Mm-hmm. We all know that the incident responders, they have mounds of data, very information rich, but or very data rich, but information poor, if you will, right? There's a lot of data about all the packets flying around on the network, but uncovering what that really means is it's part of the art and science of doing information security. So if applying a little bit of imagination and saying that even a management system, could be compromised one day, and we want to be able to look for, what are, the indicators that would suggest that something's awry here. The shift right now is the application of machine learning technology to be able to spot those things very quickly, even when the attacker compromised the system, even when they're very careful, even when they're careful to cover their tracks, right? There's always something that stands out from the typical system activity to be able to spot those type of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to transition a little bit from, what zero trust is to why it matters, and, what we are doing about it, either whether it's F5, what we're doing about it, or just as an industry, what we're doing about it. Our good friend of the show, Ray Pompon, stated in an article that good access control is the base for zero trust. And he had a slide. So I think this is from Sarah's deck, but, the root causes of API breaches, comes down to, authentication and authorization, largely in 2018 to 2020. So, do you guys agree with that access control comes down to the base? We talked about least privilege, but what about access control specifically?
Well, I mean, no authentication is most privilege, right?
Right. No authentication. That's are we even trying, people?
And it's it's common. So I would agree, right? That, it's either no authentication. Sometimes bad authentication is worse, right? That's the false sense of security. Is thinking that I'm authenticating this, but not well, so it's easily compromised, and whether that's easily compromised through automated account takeover, like bots, stuff that Shape is designed to help you fight. So I wouldn't disagree with any of this, right? I mean, I see it all the time, and APIs are the wild west. They are the SSH listening on the internet of from 1996. We're back to doing old dumb stuff again, just in new ways. It's really as that it is as bad as I just made it sound.
Wow.
Why do you think there's so much non-authentication, specifically with the APIs? Is it because developers have a mindset, well, my front door is closed, so I don't need doors, from the living room to the kitchen, or is it something else at play?
Well, I just got a phone call, and that was Stack Exchange. They wanted their unvalidated, software libraries and code back that people posted online. This goes down to developers, creatures of habit, path of least resistance. And so, sometimes, as a community, people go out and build things using unvalidated components. And so whether it may be, library to handle the session management or the authentication, authorization for an application, these things get plugged into applications. And oftentimes there's not great tools and great processes to measure how an application is doing authentication and authorization, right? And so these things get left behind. We have bad authentication, or in some cases, no authentication on components that get deployed out into production. And so, it's no surprise to see the level of breaches against, again, in the Wild West when in terms of, APIs being exposed in this manner.
I mean, I would add to that I don't want to blame everything on developers. I think part of it is usability, right? Which will always usability and availability trump security every single day of the week. And that's, if my app's not usable, right? And an app, let's be clear, is just a way of accessing data. So it's always important to remember what things exist for, and applications are just ways of presenting data of one kind or another.
I don't want to pick on
we want it
IE.
to be accessible, right? We want, the reason we built this app is because we want people to access the data, and an app or an API just alike. So if that's the case, if things that get in the way of accessing that data easily are things that we tend not to think about, or we tend to do without. And so when you talk about something like Stack Exchange, where the idea is like, it's a community site, right? DevCentral faces many of the same issues, right? We want to share the most things with the most people, but how do we do it in a safe way? And that's a non-trivial problem.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, an example to your point about you don't use applications that are not faulty but just overly complex. IE back in the day. I started using, maybe it was Mozilla, I don't remember if it was Mozilla or Firefox, but I started using a different browser because IE had so many security controls pop up. No, I'm not going to let you see the site. I'm not going to, it was unusable to be able to do anything. So I switched browsers into something that didn't get in my way. Today, it's self-signed starts with Chrome. Chrome, it makes it really, really hard to do, like big IP development with self-signed certs. So, I use Firefox instead when I'm using or doing local development.
Yeah, there's always that balance, But like Brian, like you said, I mean, usability trumps security, because if you can't use it, doesn't matter, kind of thing. So, hey, another question is, when we go back to zero trust, and I mean, you guys mentioned earlier that it's 10 plus years old. I know there was this whole situation at Google back in the day, and a little issue with Google Aurora, and some of that kind of stuff, where people, I think some developers or some analysts at McAfee coined the term anyway, whatever it is, it's like 10 plus years old, this whole zero trust idea. So why the slow, adoption of this? And then, do you kind of feel that the industry is gaining momentum toward this, or is it still going to take a while, So Corey, maybe what do you think? And then Brian, I'd love to get your thoughts too.
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly a continuous journey. It's just gaining more attention, and I think the biggest thing and biggest takeaways are things such as really what's our model, what's our framework for moving towards an environment or a means of operations where we're focusing on least privilege, as Brian brought up from the very beginning. NIST wrote a document. It's SB 800-207. If I'm not mistaken, make sure to.
That's right. No, that's right.
Make sure to check the interwebs or the Googles.
The right? Googles, yeah. You're right. 800-207.
As my mom would say, but and really, look at getting your organization on a common set of terms and language surrounding what are the variations in a zero trust architecture approach. But even that only covers part of really what you should be looking at from a zero trust perspective. There's a whole level of human concerns and business and process components as well that can and will tie into the technical or technology components of zero trust, if you will. So I think because of the nature of breaches, because of the expanding attack surfaces that we have, organizations have to look at how do you start addressing these challenges, and zero trust is kind of an umbrella term in order to drive that.
Yeah. From a model perspective, is there a VHS versus Betamax competition going on with models, or is there a plethora of models for people to adopt?
A plethora, yeah.
I think it's a fit to purpose kind of thing. You're not gonna. There's not a one size fits all approach. There's probably not even a one size fits most approach. And I'm sensitive to that because I have an enormous head and hats don't fit me, even the ones that have the adjustable strap in the back. And I think you have to look at your applications, right? You have to look at, your applications, your data sources, what are the data access paths, and find the tools that work for you. Now, one piece of guidance, and just to kind of call back something Corey mentioned earlier, is federation. To the degree that you can federate all the things. And the reason for that, if you're not familiar with federation, it's saying, give me one directory infrastructure that I can use as my source of truth of who is who has what roles in my organization and what they can access, right? So once you've got a single source of truth as a directory infrastructure, whether that's Azure AD or it's Radius or LDAP and something bolted on top, whatever that is, then you can start figuring out everything else. Because if you're trying to manage multiple different directories, you're going to quickly drown, no matter how large or small your organization is. So if there's one piece of one size fits all advice is, get a single source of truth for your directory and who has access to what, and then federate the hell out of it for everything else.
That should be a t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just as an end user, it's beautiful too, because I hate maintaining like 50 different credentials to log into my business tools. I don't mind having all those different ones to all my personal stuff to keep it isolated, company to company. But yeah, if I need to do something for F5, it's nice to have a one-stop shop for that.
Yeah.
And as a mechanism to bring that about, this is a shameless plug for our own, zero trust go-to-market strategy. And it really surrounds using an access proxy. So you SAML all the things, Josh. Absolutely. SAML or IDC all the things. But having an access proxy that sits in front of all of my application footprints and, doesn't depend on network location. Number one, it provides me an enforcement point for the varied and various authentication authorization stacks that may be issued off a Stack Exchange or GitHub that are part of my applications. So I provide a common session governance framework, and I also make sure that nothing unauthenticated ever hits the back end, regardless of whether or not per the previous slide, this was something that was unintentionally left open or not. And along the way, I'm able to measure information both inline in real time and external to the access proxy itself to make sure that we're making appropriate contextual decisions. And shameless plug also on Shape, and the magic of Shape security from F5. Part of it is being able to take that telemetry and turn that around in real time and into an actual decision. So a lot of the machine learning tools will give you information kind of after the fact, which is helpful, but it didn't help you at the time, right? So if we can reduce our mean time to detection and our mean time to respond, in terms of being able to detect an event and taking an action on it before an actual human could actually take action, that's part of the magic of machine learning and AI. Yeah,
that's awesome, because I think, Corey, it was you that mentioned earlier, you've got this issue of there's all these data points flying around everywhere. We're just consumed with it, but there's not any kind of actionable knowledge or information, so it's like I got charts coming out my ears, but I don't know what to do with them, or I don't do anything with them, so yeah. So what you said with Shape is that's super cool, man. Super cool.
So how do we achieve this? How do organizations achieve this? We kind of know what it is and why it's important. How do we achieve it? Is DevSecOps the answer or an answer to the challenges of achieving zero trust? Is it still more marketing than reality?
To the degree that we can shift security left in the process, right? So shift left, that's just a fancy way of saying design security in at the beginning of the app, right? So when the app developer is thinking about publishing an API, have security as part of that design process. That's what DevSecOps means to me, right? Is really getting security designed in from the beginning rather than bolted on at the end. And frankly, that's why we still struggle as an industry, is because security is we've been trying to do it by throwing stuff, appliances like Big IP into the network at the end of the process after the app is ready to go, and that leads to invariably being holes because it's not engineered in from the beginning. That doesn't necessarily mean force the developers to do more coding. That just means maybe code the app in a way that's more friendly to the things that are in the network, right? The Nginx gateways or the Big IP, access policy manager, rather than having to re-engineer it or do heavy integration effort after the fact. And Daniel Wolf in the chat here, jot all the APIs, right? Java Web Tokens. That's absolutely a thing, and I couldn't endorse that statement more. And that only happens if we do more shifting left with security, designing it in, for sure.
Yeah. So really quick, why do you think most organizations don't do that? And I know that's a complicated thing and lots of history, whatever. But I don't know. I would think that today people would say, hey, let's bring in security at the beginning as we're designing stuff. I don't know. What are some of the barriers there?
Yeah, it's you have two or varied silos within an organization. So your network and perhaps your SecOps folks that came out of a network background. Then you have application groups that maybe someone is an application developer or came out of a dev test and QA environment. So they look at problems from very different angles, just historically as a group. But we've seen some convergence. That DevSecOps term, if you will, in practice. You see evolution in terms of how do we automate the response. So you see SOAR solutions that help organizations take what a human incident responder may have performed and automate that so we can get to faster mitigations on incidents. And also, you look at organizations such as ourselves, in some of our competitors in the space, what we're doing is taking and looking at how do we tie identity, how do we tie infrastructure in and make those solutions one available via APIs. And so now we can take those things and take that the control of those things and automate them into other ecosystems. So when an app deploys, deploy the firewall rules, deploy the access proxy, deploy the actual SAML configuration. So register that app in Azure directly, for example, and then issue that in the proxy. Configure the DNS record. So all these things are coming together. They just take time because we've been speaking different languages for so long.
Mm.
Yeah, I want to, Anis, is how can we achieve zero trust with an existing environment when you have hundreds of applications all over the place with all different platforms? I think that comes down to something Josh said earlier, and that comes back to the ASM op guide. Start small, but most of all, start. You got to start somewhere. You can't solve the problem day one. It's a journey, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, much harder in a legacy infrastructure. Absolutely acknowledge that point, but start, right? If you have multiple directory infrastructures, you didn't have the luxury of standardizing on one. Start, consolidate two of them. Just get started. Look at legacy applications that aren't tied into a centralized directory infrastructure, and think about what's in the path, right? Oftentimes, one of the things that we've been able to help customers with is, there's a big IP out here doing nominally load balancing, basic traffic management, but there's no authentication, and that's an ideal scenario where we can actually bring authentication in after the fact, right? Nobody thought about authenticating this application or this API, but if you've got a directory that you want to tie it to, I guarantee you, and Big IP is in front of most apps. And if you're listening to us here on DevCentral, I bet you got a few. Then that's an opportunity. And I'm not trying to sell you something here, but I'm trying to sell you something here that can help you. Which is, hey, if you don't have APM turned on and you need authentication, and the app team is not going to build that overnight, you can turn that on almost overnight with something with pieces that you already have in your infrastructure. And that's F5 has made a business out of fixing broken applications or making them more secure or making them faster. And that's what Big IP does, and Nginx too. That's what we do, is we improve the quality of the application in some way or another, whether it's security or performance, what have you.
So I've been involved in a lot of these projects, and probably 80 or 90% of the applications in your environment are going to follow a finite number of access patterns, right? They're going to consume Kerberos, they're going to consume a form, they're going to consume NTLM. Maybe some modern ones are doing SAML, or then you have or JOT tokens, for example. So the first step is to get the access proxy within the flow where we're doing measurement on authentication and authorization. You probably didn't have SSO to start with, right? So, what you can do is start to set up a framework and a library of these are the access patterns for these type of applications. And what you'll find is over time, that you can cover most things without necessarily doing anything specialized or outside the beaten path, if you will. Most of your applications will follow well written paths, if you will. And for the things that don't, those are the things that you'll end up spending most of your time on to bring them into the fold.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Coming back to, Anis is, talks like, kind of throwing the hands up, and how do you even get started? Just like, inventory, it's like, you come back to that, know thyself, know thy enemy and know thyself. It's like, you don't really know where to get started if you don't know what you have. So that's a good place to start.
Nice.
I wanted to bring this slide back up. Talking about when we're talking about shifting left to build security into the life cycle of development. And I bring this up because we're innovating, not evolving as app developers, people who host apps and deploy apps. On the attack angle, but they're attacking and evolving. And so, we need to not just innovate, we need to evolve. The problem, and maybe it's not so much for the companies that have been breached, but the companies that aren't breached, you run that risk of, well, I might get breached one day, but I know there's actuaries, and especially the big companies, but maybe even the small ones that are running the numbers. It's like, well, is it cost effective for us to go back and build that into what we already have, or do we wait for when we're eventually compromised and just pay it out? And so, I think that mindset's the thing that we need to attack as an industry and overcome, because there's always going to be attackers. It's kind of like that whack-a-mole. We fix a problem, they discover a new angle, whether it's with the protocols themselves or the way those protocols have been implemented.
Yeah, I mean, attackers are not bound by laws and all those pesky things,
right?
And codes of morality and conduct. They just go for it. But that's the challenge. I mean, we've got to keep up as an industry. We've got to, we need to innovate and evolve. We need to do these things. But some people may say, well, there's no way I can keep up with it all. And I guess what I would say to that is just start. Just like we've said, start somewhere. Take that first step, and you're one step better than you were yesterday. And then do it again. Yeah.
Take back your initiative, right? So, we see the initiative to attackers, oftentimes, right? And so we just kind of wait, to get attacked, and then we react and we put in some control. But, leverage your, measure your attack surface, close off the things that you can, generate funnels for which you send the attackers down, and you put strong defenses, on those funnels. So, even if you are breached, that you can respond and react quickly to, control any sort of the damage that can occur. Right. I don't think just saying, hey, we'll just pay out whatever happens is an option, because you may not have any more money to pay out at that point, because you might be out of business. Virtually every business on the planet is very much dependent on information. Whether you're a factory, well, those robots, in the factory, and they're running, small, versions of, or they're running embedded versions of Linux, for example. And, if you're subject to a ransomware attack, for example, maybe those robots don't run anymore, right? Or maybe the robots have been programmed to damage themselves, right? And so you can't recover them, any reasonable scope of time. So these are really, really issues where the cyber can absolutely impact the physical as well. So we want to make sure that we're taking back our initiative, use our imagination, force attackers into our own funnels, so that we, for lack of better terms, we control the terrain, if you will. If we can control the terrain, we can win.
That's right.
Yeah, I think especially for those who haven't started, with either an adjustment to a zero trust model, or even on the developer side, they're not automating their infrastructure. Just from an app delivery perspective, there's a reticence to get started, because it's almost paralysis, right? It's like, I don't know how to get started. It's like, yes, start small, but how do I get over that hump? What would you say to that user who's just kind of overwhelmed and just like deer in the headlights?
So for some users, right, and that, a lot of times that deer in the headlights is for the environment where there's a lot of legacy applications, and for them, I'm gonna make a very shameless plug for a freemium program we have at F5 for those who are looking to bring applications forward into modern auth with Azure AD. We actually have a limited number of free pro services engagements available. So that's free hands on keyboards helping you do the work and 90-day licenses for APM, so you can see what it'll do. So there's a very limited number of these, but if you know who your F5 account team is, feel free to reach out to them directly. If you don't, I believe Mr. Silva has graciously shared all our Twitter handles. You know how to get to us on Twitter. Slide into my DMs, as the kids like to say, and I'll connect you with who you need. And this is a limited number of engagements, not a lot, but it's really about taking those legacy applications, getting them into modern auth, tying them. We've got this fabulous integration with Active Directory. Anise has pointed out that they've been using Kerberos and APM to get things tied into their Active Directories. Daniel Wolf is over here advertising for the API protection. I mean, we don't need to sell this stuff. Our customers have seen it work, and know exactly the value here. But then we got my Pittsburgh news here. I'm gonna de-anonymize him. That's our SE out in Pittsburgh, Maurice Gordon, one of my favorites. He is an all-star out there. Pittsburgh is very lucky to have him. But he did one of these Azure AD projects, and it's a joint engagement with Microsoft. We're not going rogue here at F5 and doing what we want. We're fully vetted and approved and rubber stamped by Microsoft and with the Azure AD. And this stuff is, we take the guesswork out of it for you. The integration works really well, and it can be a way for you to target some of those apps that you think, it's so old, I'm never going to be able to get it forward into this zero trust world and modern auth. Now we can do it for you. We can absolutely help, and it's actually pretty easy. So, if you're looking for little baby steps you can take, that's a great way to start.
And a big early victory, right? Because the early victories spawn more victories down the road.
Yeah.
And there's another baby step as well, and this is actually a great initiative and resource to the community, and that's Device ID Plus. And so we have a free Device ID offering, and what this is the ability to measure and persistently identify a specific browser as they move throughout your applications. And so it's a free offering. We provide a free portal, and what it is a little piece of JavaScript. And when that JavaScript is loaded in the browser, we generate a device ID, and that's provided back to your applications via cookie. And now, regardless of the changes in IP address for that browser, we get a device identifier, and you can leverage that as part of the telemetry from everything from security to marketing purposes. And again, that's a free offering as well.
Yeah, and in fact, we had Summit, one of the Shape, masterminds, on DevCentral Connects a few weeks ago, and he talked about that device ID, and it's a fascinating technology, and it's free. It's awesome.
It's free.
The price is right, man.
And that's pretty cool because it's like breadcrumbs, right? It's breadcrumbs that go above and beyond your authentication. It's like, okay, I know you're authenticated to be in the system, but maybe we haven't established that least privilege inside the organization. But I was like, well, I know you're supposed to be over there in finance, but now I see you kind of drifting over to corporate governance or IT storage shares and all that. It's like, what are you over there for?
Well, it's becoming table stakes. Can I see that one browser was actually connected with 40 different user accounts, or this one device ID shifted between the South Pacific into New York, and they did that in a matter of 3 hours, for example. And now I can tie in and say, okay, this device generated near and dear to Brian's heart these number of WAF events, right, and tied to these identities, right. Now I can start to draw insights just from that piece of metadata that I can use throughout my incident response process.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think Brian just shed a tear there when you said WAF, event. And so Corey, to your point, either someone's got a supersonic airplane moving from the South Pacific to New York in 2 minutes, or maybe there's something else weird going on, right? So, yeah,
that scramjet, it's going to be a reality. I promise.
Is it one of those high-speed rail, train car things?
The Hyperloop.
No, it's not.
Superconductors, man, they're the future.
That's right.
Well, guys, awesome. we are at time. Any parting thoughts on Zero Trust before we let you go?
Reach out to folks on Corey's team. Corey runs our security solutions architects here in North America. So if you're a North American viewer, reach out to him and his team. He's got some of the smartest that we've got on the continent on this topic and many other security topics. My team, we're spread out globally, so we can backstop Corey and all his counterparts in the other theaters around the world. So if you got more questions that we could possibly answer in this hour that's flown by, reach out. We got solution architects in every discipline, but a whole bunch in security. And so if you're thinking about Zero Trust, we got people that can help you, and not just with the F5 part, but all the things that we touch that are adjacent, like Azure AD, which we've mentioned at length, because it is the most popular identity as a service on the planet by far.
Yeah. And on the flip side, follow Brian, for some of the thought leadership and really, if there's something that needs to be built and, something on the forefront of technology, and you want F5 to potentially build that, reach out to Brian and he can get those ideas to the right places.
Nice. Good deal. Well, guys, I appreciate you making time to be here with us. Yeah. I'm sure someday soon you guys will be back here on DevCentral Connects with us. So just appreciate your time.
We solve Zero Trust. We'll be right back.
Awesome.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. It's been
appreciate a pleasure. It, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, man. All right. Well, great couple of guys, man. It's one of those. It's like I'm glad they're on our team.
No kidding.
And it's good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, man, this was a lot of fun today. There's others.
Maurice, I wanted to bring up Maurice because it's been just a few years since we've been able to be at PNC Park with you. That's right. For a Pittsburgh Pirate game. So we're gonna have to make that happen as COVID shuts down. Hopefully.
That's right.
We'll need to make that happen.
Get us back out there, man. Go Buckers, I think was the word that they used. Good stuff. No, man, but this was a great great time. Zero Trust, what is it? How can you implement it? Do you ever really arrive? But I think if there's one takeaway other than, the a lot of good practical tips with least privilege and those kinds of things, but the big one is just get started,
Yep.
Just start. Because one quick thing that I'll just say before we end up here, as I was thinking about this, you could possibly have someone that's out there thinking, well, what if I just don't want to get on this Zero Trust train? What if I don't want to get on board and just kind of keep doing and just avoid that whole thing? Then you'll do that to your demise, to your detriment, right? I mean, that is not a wise way to move. So whether you like it or not, this is the wave of the future and the present, and it's time to get on board with this thing. So just get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like that whole just do it right now kind of thing. Yeah. It's like get moving. Like tomorrow is too late. So
that's right. Awesome, man.
All right.
Jason, it's been another great one, man.
We're over time, so we're just going to shut this thing down. But I'm right back here next week. You want answers, and April Fool's Day. So who knows what's going to happen? And then John, I'll see you back here in 2 weeks.
It's going to be amazing. All right. Great to see everybody out there.